I want to welcome everyone to the Media Roundtable podcast. This is a special edition because we're going to give you something that most people don't get to hear. We're going to let you get another free sample of our Chief Audio Officer Summit this year, where we had the largest leading brands in the space who hold this whole place together. And to kick off the summit, I was joined by my partner in crime, Connor Doyle. Now, just picture this beautiful sunset, Terranea Resort, sunny Southern California. And we had two very powerful guests come to talk about something that doesn't get enough airtime, and that is the power of independence. Independent creators are really what built this whole ecosystem. They're what stood it up. And the biggest shows that you probably listen to most likely started as independents. But it's important that we give them some love and shine light on them because they are really the beacons of free speech, of independent thought. And it's important that we not only have great big platforms and networks for people to sign on to for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. We need to support those independent voices that are trying to maintain their independence. So we had two of the leaders come in, two names you might have heard before. Maybe you've heard of Stephen Bartlett from Diary of a CEO and Ben Shapiro from the Daily Wire, two names you've likely heard of if you have been paying any attention to this industry. We talked about what they have done and what choices and trades they've made to maintain independence after all these years and all this success, turning down the big money to be able to do things their way. And we didn't just talk to them about how they built their brands and their businesses within this space. It was also about lessons that marketers can take away to help build their companies, because these guys drive a lot of consumption and engagement and subscriptions, the kind of funnel activities that every marketer needs. So if you care about this industry, you will care about this conversation. And I can't wait for you to take a listen. Here we go. Some of you may have heard of this individual. He started a company called Social Chain, which went public on the London Stock Exchange, stepped down as CEO at the age of 29. What have I been doing with my life? 29, he stepped down. He now has the second largest reaching podcast in the world when you aggregate across the platforms. He is on the Time 100 Creators list. And one thing that we're going to talk about is had an 8-figure, $100 million offer to sign with a group and turned it down. That's the power of influence that we have in our first guest, Stephen Bartlett.
See you again.
See you again.
Stephen, see you. Come on, have a seat. Yeah.
Hello. What a view. I thought this was a wedding. It's unbelievable.
It kind of is. It's more like Connor and I are having a bit of a wedding with this merger and some of the other folks. You may have heard. Stephen, thank you so much for coming and being a part of this. There's so much, I think, that we can all learn, partly from you as a creator, but also part as an entrepreneur, as a business leader. And also, let's not forget the nature of the content that you create. First things first, can you help us better understand the breadth of the business that you're operating today? Because I think sometimes people just think about the show, but they don't realize what Flight Story really is doing.
Yeah, so Flight Story has two central divisions. There's the media company, which scales human IP across all mediums, so newsletters, social, podcasting, whatever that means these days, and other forms of media like books and speaking and events. And then on the other side is our investment fund, where we invest in some of the world's most exciting companies, whether it's Mr. Beast or SpaceX or Grok, the inference chip company in San Francisco, or some incredible one of our sort of health investments, or Perfect TED, which is a matcha energy product that's the fastest growing company in the UK at the moment. So it's really broad. I'm an investor in more than 50 companies. I've probably founded about 10. And I've worked in everything from, I worked in psychedelics for 2 years at the very front of the sort of biotech revolution in turning psychedelic compounds into mental health drugs. I was there for 2 years. I've built companies in social media, marketing. I have a software company in San Francisco that's a Web3 infrastructure company that's Shopify and Coinbase have invested in. Shopify here today, which is valued at $160 million, and it's a software company. I do the podcast, I have media businesses, I do lots of things, and I think in doing quite a lot and getting a lot of perspectives, it's beneficial. Like, it's been really beneficial for me to understand the principles of scaling, of building, of attention, of psychology. And I'm just like really obsessed with everything I do.
And I got to talk to Christiana in depth the other day. Yeah, and she was telling me some of the things that you're doing and just the different approach that you take as a founder, as a business leader, some of the values that you bring into the business. And so I'd love for you to share what are those values and how that actually plays out in the business that you're running.
So I think we're extremely different, and everybody says that, and it's always bullshit. So it might be bullshit. Your job is to figure out if it's bullshit, if it's something we came up with on like a strategy offsite, or if it's true. We take an extreme approach to experimentation, which is one of the things that's central to our success. The Diary of a CEO will add another 500,000 subscribers this month on YouTube. We'll become the biggest podcast in the world by 2027. As of the car ride over here, that will happen on the 13th of September, 2027. We test everything. So we test the CO2 levels in the room when I'm interviewing, the impact an exclamation mark has on the title, the impact quotation marks have on the title, the impact different colors have. We test probably 300 to 400 different things per episode in just the way we're going to present the episode before it comes out. We've built a platform where 1,000 people can watch the episode before it goes out. So we get the retention graph back so we can edit it to be highly retentive, because retention equals high AVD, average view duration, which equals more YouTube recommendations and more recommendations across other platforms, which means more views. It's an extreme approach to killing the guesswork. And this understanding that, isn't it such a great shame that you go to great creative lengths to produce something, whether it's an advert or a show, and then it can be let down by 2,000%. I was just thinking about a recent test we did where the worst performing test result was 2,000% less than the best performing test result we did. The same 3-hour conversation, the same flight to New York to meet Gavin Newsom, the same production effort can vary by 2,000% because you didn't run a test. So at Flight Story, we kill the guesswork, and that's both on the media side, but also on the ad partner side. Like when I became a podcaster, it was shocking to me that the way ads work are, think of an idea, and then you put it in the media, and you just hope it went well. For me, like for us, it was you think of a creative idea based on the audience personas, you then test it rigorously to make sure it's effective, and whatever metric you consider to be effective, and then you put it into the media. And that the variance is staggering. I remember on one of our tests when we were testing 2 different ad creatives, one of them was a 1% click-through and the other is a 20% click-through based on 50 different creatives. That's a 2,000% difference in ROI because you ran a test that cost us $100. And that's really how cheap it is. So one of the key principles of Flight Story, and our head of failure runs this team with the experimentation team, is to
That's a title?
That's a title. Grace's job title is head of failure, is to kill all guesswork. And again, a first principle here when you think about why experimentation is so important now, but also in the future, is the correct answers to how we do this game of media are changing so quickly, especially in the world of AI and with platforms accelerating, that the best way to find the correct answer to basically any creative decision is to increase your rate of experimentation and failure. You're not going to get the correct answer from me on stage today because in 6 months' time, it'll be a different answer. So the fishing rod, which will mean that you can eat for a lifetime, is a principle and a cultural design in your company of increasing the rate of experimentation and failure. The thesis is that's how you find the correct answer in almost any facet of business is you increase your rate of failure. That's a company culture challenge. An org design challenge, but a company culture challenge. And we're all indoctrinated into this idea to the point that there isn't a team member that would come to me and say, this is our creative idea, without then saying, and we ran the test, and here are the testing results. And even Will, who's running around here with the camera, he's 23 years old. And within 6 months, he knew that when we're producing a new show, a new format, a new concept, whatever, he would come to me and not say, this is my idea. He'd say, this is my idea. And here are the 100 tests we ran on our platform to see what people were interested in, what they would click, how long they would watch it. So failure and experimentation are a central principle. That's like super, yeah. And I think that's fantastic because guessing and arguing in boardrooms is like super hard. It's like a horrible way to live. But the greatest companies in the world, they realize that, especially in a digital environment, you no longer need to guess. And that is, for me, the single biggest thing that has led to the success of the Diary of a CEO. Like, I'm under no illusions that I'm asking revolutionary questions that are 1,000% better than another host. I'm under no illusions that that's my skill. I believe that our skill is we are the best at the world at failing.
And when does that conversation happen where you decide to go against a test? How does that ever happen?
Great question. You start to learn these strange ways that the testing results don't translate as perfectly as you thought, or the testing methodology doesn't translate to another environment. So let me make this super simple. If I tested something using, let's say, Google, and then I'm making an assumption that will then translate to another environment, like in real life, and it doesn't always translate. And so you start to learn those translations. And the other time is if the testing the results don't align with your own values or some sort of broader creative context. And then the human would make a different decision. So when I get the testing results back, it doesn't mean I pick the best performing test. I might pick number 4 because I think number 4 is a better balance on other factors. But I'd rather see all of them and make the decision than guess in the dark, because I always remember I said it earlier, but when Mo Gordak came on my podcast, he was the ex-head of Google X, and we had this incredible conversation for 3 hours, and then we ran all the testing, and we could see that the worst performing test was 1% and the top performing test was 20%, and the variance was at 1,900% difference. And I remember sitting in my chair going, damn, like all of my competitors and everyone else in the industry is guessing, and they might land on that 1%. The same conversation, the same effort from all of my team to book this person for months. We spent 2 years trying to get him on the show, and we could have hit 1% because we were guessing. What a shame. What are all the other places in business we guess that we don't have to? And then that becomes my religion, killing all guessing everywhere we can. And once it spreads like a virus through your organization. And can you imagine how that changes your trajectory if you looked at that on a graph? Just finding 1% incremental gains that are compounding for or against you. And this overlaps with my second critical principle, which is this idea of 1%, we call it. So the two most popular phrases in our company are failure and experimentation, which I think of as one, and the other is 1%. And the two sort of overlap in the sense that the 1% ideology is just believing that sometimes the smallest things, the things that you forecast to be petty and insignificant, are the most important things because they compound invisibly, like your teeth. Like, things in life that are easy to do also happen to be easy not to do. It's easy to brush your teeth, so it's also easy not to. It's easy to save $1, so it's also easy not to. But if I play out the scenario with your teeth, brush them today, let's say you don't brush them today, you're fine. You don't brush them every day this week, you're kind of fine. Your wife, your husband's going to say something, but whatever. You're fine. You're fine. Don't brush them every day this month. You're still kind of fine. You're fine. Don't brush them every day for 5 years. You're fucked. When did it happen? It happened today with a decision that was easy to do or easy not to do. And in the Slight Edge, a book I read when I was 18 that became this virus in my mind, it says that every aspect of your life and business is compounding on a graph that looks like this. It's slow, then it's fast for you, or it's slow, then it's fast against you right now. Your personal relationships, your skin, your hair, your finances, everything in your business, your company culture, it's all compounding on a graph that's slow, then fast, like your teeth. You'd be in a dental chair having your molars ripped out of your mouth 5 years from now if you didn't brush your teeth consistently today. So this belief in the tiniest things. And the great thing about small things is, like, Jemima in our team posted in the Slack channel when she changed the air freshener in one of our podcasting recording studios and everybody clapped. Did you hear that little giggle? That giggle means the perception is that's petty. And in petty is a great opportunity, because sometimes when you turn over small stones, you find big things. So when we changed 10 seconds at the start of the Diary of a CEO, it resulted in a 350% increase in the amount of subscribers we got. I had no idea it was going to be that pivotal. In fact, we have 11.2 million subscribers on YouTube as I sit here now. If we hadn't have changed those 10 seconds, we would have 3 million subscribers now. So sometimes it's best to just really care about the smallest things, because you never really know. And you can also bet that your competitors will think it's petty. And also, when it comes to team motivation, if I told my team to go in search of a big step forward, they would become demotivated because the science and psychology shows that small wins repeatedly create psychological momentum. It's in the Harvard Business Review studies, they said thousands of people kept work diaries, and when they were asked what was your favorite day in work, they all pointed at a day where they had even a small feeling of progress. Jemima, when she posted that air freshener that day, had a small feeling of progress. So it motivates your team. You find these big transformative steps forward that sometimes your competitors will overlook. And the compounding returns of finding 100 1% is a 100% gain, actually without compounding returns. So those two principles. And if you can just do those two things, I genuinely believe you can do amazing things. And I actually do genuinely believe that, but those two things are hard because it's culture. And changing the culture of a group of individuals is like turning a bus around in an alleyway. So, clapping over here. Yeah. Who do you work with?
We've heard. Can we go back to September 13th, 2027 for a second? I want to know the math on that, because obviously there's a calculation, right? Come on.
Well, yeah, so I know the speed in which the biggest podcasts in the world grow, and then I know that we're currently growing about 5 times faster. So you can play it forward and say by that date we'll have, certain audience size and reach, and that'll make us the biggest show on earth.
So assuming the trend line holds.
So it was actually November the 5th, which I like because Guy Fawkes. You probably don't know what Guy Fawkes is, but
of course we do.
Yeah, so Guy Fawkes was. We got some Brits here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it was November 5th, but we had a really great month this month. We actually beat all of our records this month, so it's moved forward to September 17th, I think it is. I checked in the car, and I posted it in our Slack channel to the team. I said the date's moved forward. So, and these things, I was also explaining why these things matter. People like objectives and goals. When we were number 1 in the UK, I made this big presentation to the team called the Moonshot. Big presentation I did about the space landing and all these things, and I convinced my team how irrelevant and small we were relative to the rest of the world. We're in one language, where we're limited to 10% of the world's population who are fluent in this language. We're big in Europe. But look at America. They have no idea who we are. So we set out this objective to grow in America. I said, I'm going to fly to America. I now live here. I've moved here. And we're going to really, really focus on the American market. And by this time next year, we'll be in the top 10 on Spotify. That was the goal. And by that time next year, we were number 9 on Spotify. And then Spotify released the rankings. I know Spotify here. We were the 5th biggest show in the world on Spotify. And this year we think we'll be the 2nd biggest in the world on Spotify.
Can we go back to the 100 million? What was the calculation behind that decision to turn that down?
Yeah, there's so many things here. In Britain, yeah, we don't put that many ads and stuff. But I lived in New York for 3 years, and I'm not sure whether I'm watching an advert with my favorite show in, or my favorite show with some ads in. And so when we had offers come into CB who sat over there, and they were trying to explain to me that they were going to put 12 adverts in this podcast, I just don't think you'd need to do that. I think you need to make better ads. I think that's the game. I think if you made better ads, you wouldn't need to run so many of them because your advertising partners would get so much of a better return that they wouldn't need to buy so many ad slots. And so that was a really big part of the decision. Everything I've talked to you about today about experimentation and innovation and building our own software to solve these problems in the process of producing media and selling ads, I felt that the partners we spoke to were a little bit slower. And so there was a lack of alignment there, which I didn't think was helpful. And we really are on a mission. I described it as being a war in the green room just a second ago. We're really on a mission to change how people view host-read ad reads in podcast media. We believe they should be content, not ads. I believe my audience should get to the end of the 60 seconds and say, I'm so glad that I listened to that or watched that. And the way that we're measuring that is by both the efficacy of it, so how effective is it at driving clicks or those kind of metrics, but also just the retention, because you see often in the back end of our analytics that someone might skip forward when an ad plays. I want them to rewind when an ad plays. And so we're at war with that at the moment to really help shift the industry. And the way that we'll do that is by giving really great case studies of what ad reads can be in this medium. And
we want to help you build those, by the way.
Yeah, and exactly. That's why you've been such a great partner, and that's why I'm here, because You're one of the few partners that is ideologically aligned on all things I just said.
I mean, sometimes when I tell people we transcribe their show, we transcribe their ad reads, we mark them for duration, we rate them based on our set of our criteria, they're like, what's going on? But you've been very receptive to that, and it's helpful.
And I think we're all just beginning in that regard. So that was a part of it. And then commercially, I think we'll do better than the offer. So we're
Sounds
really
like
glad.
you will. Yeah. It makes a lot more sense now.
And so how does the vetting process work for you when a brand comes to you? How do you decide if it's a good fit, for you and for the brand and for the show?
It's much easier when you're not doing that many ads. So it's much easier when in a 3-hour conversation, you're only doing sort of 2 or 3 ads for them to be authentic partners. And it's funny, I just had this conversation in the little hotel room, because I've got some of my team here. I was saying that my audience know me. Like in the last 4 episodes, I've started subtly talking about Buddhism, because I'm interested in it. So my audience, and I've started talking about becoming a father. My audience know me, and I think protecting that relationship I have with them and that authenticity I have with them, where they understand what I'm about. They've listened to me for a long time, and sometimes 2, 3, 6, 7 hours a week, is really matters to me. That's the long game. This also goes back to rejecting the offer. The long game here is fewer ads, better ads, and ads where you have a deeper relationship with the advertiser, where you're not just reading an ad out because you've got a 30-day deal with them. You are an employee or co-founder or partner in their company helping drive their business. So when someone stops me in the street and talks to me about Whoop, for example, one of my partners, I can tell them about the features that are coming up in Whoop. I know everything about Whoop. I've been to Whoop's product laboratory in Boston. We have an office in Whoop's headquarters in Boston. That's how integrated we are with that partner. I was there helping them design the sleep mask. So when one of my audience comes up to me at any point in the world, I can talk to them about the company, and they know that it's real. They know it's real. And so the process I go through to select partners is they'll contact, we'll have a conversation with you guys, with my team, and there'll be a pitch made, and I will look at. It actually starts before then. My team are constantly they're constantly stalking me to figure out what I'm into now. Listening to the show, they ask me every week, what are you thinking about now? What are you into now? And it's crazy how sometimes I talk about something on the podcast, and the company I'm talking about or the product I'm talking about. Can I use ketone as an example? Can I? There's no issues with that. So good example. I'm currently in ketosis, which is a diet, right? It just means that I don't. Oh, you again? Which means I don't eat carbs or sugar, basically. And I was talking about that on the show. And I get back to my office in London, and there's a product on my desk from a company that makes exogenous ketones, and it sits there for 2 weeks because apparently you're not meant to drink things people send you in the post. 2 weeks in, it's late at night. I thought, fuck it, no one's here. I drink it. Amazing. So I say to my team, I said, those ketone shots someone sent to the office on my desk, they're unbelievable. I'm obsessed. I went around the office. There's a video of me going around the office trying to give all my team members them because it gives you energy, it makes you more productive. So I'm like shopping them round. And then it turns out, I think they'd got in touch with you, Lily, already. So we had a meeting, and I was like, please respond to them and let's set something up. I flew to LA. The founders came and watched the show. For 2 or 3 months, we have meetings. I understand what they're about. And we signed a major deal. And for me, that's a perfect example because my audience know that and the reason why they sent it to the office is because when I started talking about ketones on the podcast, their sales exploded. And they said to me, we're trying to figure out why our sales exploded. And then we found out from our little referral thing that it was your show. And the same with Barefoot, Vivo Barefoot shoes. Same thing. I talk about it in an episode. The episode does 17 million views, 17 million downloads. The founders of Vivo Barefoot had a huge spike in sales. They tried to figure out where the sales came from. They realized it was this segment on my show where I said to Will, can you chuck me my shoes? He threw them to me and I held them up. And so the company got in touch. I met the founders. They came to my house. We had 3 months of conversations. We signed a deal. That for me is perfect. And also sometimes I invest in these companies. So in Ketone, I've invested several $1 million. In Whoop, I invested. In Zoe, I invested several $1 million. In Ketone IQ, I invested several $1 million. For me, that's the perfect scenario where I invest, I'm part of the team, I'm a brand partner, and yeah.
You got a hell of a flywheel.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so at this point, we're going to expand the conversation, and Stephen's going to stay with us. We're going to welcome someone else to the stage. Let me tell you about this person. This individual speaking of 100 million, founded a $100 million media company today with one of America's most downloaded podcasts, hundreds of thousands of paying subscribers through direct audience support, and is proof that independence really can make a material difference for a brand, can do things that are really hard to emulate. A Harvard Law School grad, best-selling author, and a case study in audience loyalty. Please welcome my friend, Ben Shapiro. Okay, we're doing Tonight Show style. It's like, now you got to sit for a minute and listen. We're going to... but
I have to say, I mean, what you're doing is unbelievable. That sounds so good. I'm like sitting there learning and find some companies to invest in. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, suddenly everyone at Oxford Road, now it's mandatory to listen to Diary of a CEO every day. New policy. Now, the aggressive experimentation. Ben, you run quite a business, and I think, some people might have heard of you, and they might know you for certain things, but I don't think people appreciate enough the business that you have built. Can you talk about the kind of shape and scope of the business that you run?
Sure. So Daily Wire started in a pool house. It was me and my business partner, Jeremy Boring, and Caleb Robinson, a couple other people. I think our grand total was maybe 7 or 8 people working for us at the very beginning. We had a seed fund of $4.7 million. We operated purely off of cash flow for the first 8 years of the business. Last year, we did $200 million in business. We have about 1 million paid subscribers. And then we do somewhere between $50 and $60 million in advertising revenue every year. So the subscription model and the advertising revenue model are where most of our money is made. We have merch. We have some brands of our own. We have a little razor company that does maybe $20 million a year. That was a response. This is a funny story, but it was a response to actually an advertiser boycott.
Watch your audience.
Yep. Oh, we have fun. It's a good story. What do you want? But the business is obviously maintained, and it was started in large part on the basis of advertisers and advertiser loyalty and brand loyalty. And then the subscriptions were built on the back of that.
You buy advertising too, yeah?
Yes, we spend an awful lot of money on advertising.
So what do you chalk the growth up to? How do you get to the scale that you got? How much of that is like running a really robust paid marketing program, and how much of it comes down to the programming, and what are the drivers that have made you as successful as you are?
So when we originally founded the company, one of the sort of sayings that we used as a guide was that luck is not a business strategy. And particularly in the online space, I think that the tendency for creators is to think, if I make something amazing and I just throw it out on YouTube, then magically tomorrow morning it will have 3 million hits, I'll be famous and I'll be rich. And I think that anybody who's been in the creator space tries that for a while and then realizes pretty quickly that actually that's not how the business works, that essentially you do have to build a marketing machine in order to really have the opportunity to be in front of enough eyeballs to garner audience loyalty and organic growth. That's sort of the entry ticket that you require. And so when we first started the company, one of the fundamental principles was the idea that we weren't a political company. Obviously, we do political news and opinion, but we weren't a political company in the main. We were a marketing company that did politics. The goal was to get in front of as many eyes as possible. And it did begin for me really as an ideological thing, because I care much more about the values of the company than I even do about the money-making aspect of the company. The money's nice, but I did this for free for a very, very long time before I started making money off of it.
Well, okay, so that's interesting because we're talking a lot about values. So there's values that you have that you bring to the content that you produce. But what do you require of the team that works at the company? Because I imagine you don't require that everybody share the exact same values that you have. Like, what does that look?
We certainly don't have some sort of like political screener where if you voted the wrong way, you don't get to work for the company or anything like that. But what we do require, just in terms of what we're looking for in our employees, the number one quality is hunger. We, for example, do not have a screening process that screens for educational level of attainment. The three of us who started the company, me, Jeremy Boring, Caleb Robinson, the only one of us who graduated from college is me. I went to college, I went to law school, neither of the other two graduated from college. And so we have a basic rule, which is that if somebody comes in and they're smart and they're hungry, I can teach somebody to be better at their job if they're relatively smart. I cannot teach somebody to be hungry. It is the one thing that you just cannot teach somebody. They're either hungry or they're not. And no matter how much you get behind a talented person who's not hungry, if they're not hungry, it's not going to matter. Eventually, they're simply going to run out of effort. And then no matter how hard you push them, you're going to have to let them go in the end.
And when you think about the work that you do with brands, I know your values haven't changed as you've been doing this, and I knew you before you were doing this. But since, how has your approach to working with advertisers evolved to where it is today?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that we've had some very long-time advertisers, including some who are in the audience. We have an advertiser in the audience who's been here since 2015 in Legacy Box, but we have a bunch of other advertisers who are here and have been long-term advertisers on the program. And the reason for that is because the thing that I always say to advertisers when I start working with them is, please, my job is to make sure that your product succeeds in the marketplace. If your product is not succeeding, that is not because of something about your product. I've already looked at your product. I like your product. It's why we're advertising the product. I'm not going to advertise anything that I think is terrible. I have to think that it's a really good product so that I can sell it to my audience, because inauthenticity just reeks off of people in the podcast space. If your audience reads inauthenticity, then they immediately write it off. They don't care at all. The biggest thing is advertiser feedback. I want to hear from advertisers. If things are not going well, if things have gotten stagnant, if the copy has gotten old. Now, I'll tell you if I think it's gotten old, but the truth is that nobody's going to know that better than the advertiser who's spending the money, and no one has a stronger interest in making sure that the advertisement works than the advertiser. So please let us know first so we can fix that. And that's always been my approach with the advertisers. Let's sit, let's talk it out, let's figure out what's the best copy. Let's blue sky and think of creative ideas that are going to work for the audience, that the audience is really invested in the product. And it certainly works. I mean, to the point where when we do live shows, for example, and we do an ad read, I'll do live shows, and I'll actually, very often when people do live shows, they put the ads in later. I actually don't do that. When I do a live show, it'll be 5,000 people in the audience. I will go into the ad read in the middle of the live show in front of 5,000 people, and usually it gets the biggest applause of the night because people know what's coming. I mean, it's become almost a meme with regard to my show, where I'll be talking about something very serious, and it's like, but first, let's talk about something unbelievably serious, the fact that you're going to die. Policy Genius can help you with that, right? That sort of stuff is just integrated into the show, and it's become a funny part of how people listen to the show and a fun part of how people listen.
You know, one of the things Stephen was talking about earlier was, one of the reasons he decided to stay independent was because of ad load. Actually at this conference a year ago, we published a report on ad load and the correlation between ad response and how many ad minutes per hour are running. And it's very interesting to see where the breaks are. Your business also did something that was counterintuitive in that you actually reduced your ad load. What was the thesis behind that?
So we reduced it, and then we increased the size of the show, actually, recently. I mean, just this year, we increased the size of the show so that we could have more ad load. But one of the things that we were seeing is that if there are not enough content periods during the show, people would tune out. So if you had 4 ads and then you were breaking into the show every 7 minutes for an ad or every 10 minutes for an ad, people get tired of that. They don't want that, and they start fast forwarding through the ads. And that's what I would do as a listener. And so what we started doing is, for example, grouping 2 ads together so people know that this is going to be an ad break, but we're going to try and make the ad entertaining and interesting so you stick around through that. And there's a guarantee that when you're on the other side of that, you're going to get 25 uninterrupted minutes of content. And if we want to put more ads, then the audience deserves more content to go along with those ads, because treating the audience as though they have a never-ending supply of attention so that you can just play with them and put too many ads. It doesn't serve the audience. It doesn't serve the advertiser.
Yeah, the advertisers definitely lose out when and I've always been so worried coming from radio that podcasting was going to turn into radio where you got 20 minutes an hour of ad units, and it just dilutes the power of it, right? And like you guys are moving in the other direction, which is so important, but you have to make a decision that you're not going to make as much money as you could in the short term, which is a decision that you've both made. So, when you think about the world that we're in today, how do you deal with the fact that advertisers, you're not, in the same way you're talking about, you don't expect your values to be the same as the values of all your employees, but you have to have values for your employees. What are the values that you expect of your advertisers, and how should advertisers think about what they have in common with you?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that advertisers should think about, and obviously we're in a political space, and that always means that red flags go up for a lot of advertisers and advertising agencies because they think, oh my goodness, too spicy. Somebody's going to get offended. I think the first thing to recognize is that the American people are a lot more tolerant, actually, than the online world. I think that everyone's brain has been skewed by X in a really radical and terrible way. And if you go out and you actually meet human beings, people don't tend to deal with each other in the way that people deal with each other online. And this is true for, I think, all ad agencies and all advertisers, which is why one of the things that we actually implemented many years ago was a cool down period for advertisers. We always say if an advertiser joins the show, wonderful. If they want to cancel, that's fine. I mean, it's a free country. People should be allowed to cancel their advertising contracts. But if you're going to do that on the basis of whatever the controversy of the day is, we mandate that you have a 72-hour cooldown, meaning you can tell us you want out, but it's 72 hours until that's final, and you should probably have a conversation with me so we can talk it through. Because the truth is people tend to fire really, really quickly and react really, really quickly. It's particularly true in PR departments, which want to respond incredibly quickly to things, when the truth is that the news cycle is so fast that most things burn out, and the oversensitivity that you see online is really not reflected in sales or in real life. And brands can do themselves real damage by jumping too fast on a controversy they think is erupting that actually isn't erupting. It was just sort of a bump in the road. So, when it comes to advertisers, what I'm looking for is the same thing I hope I'm providing to an advertiser, which is loyalty. Right? I am loyal to your brand. I am expending my brand equity, which I take very, very seriously, on your product and telling my audience that your product is good enough that I use it and that I think you should use it and your family should use it. And if a brand wants to work with us, that doesn't mean you have to agree with me, but you have to at least acknowledge that we're in the realm of the reasonable, that if you decide to leave, that it's not because there's some sort of character flaw, some deep and abiding character flaw. In the same way that if I decided not to work with an advertiser after a period of time for a business reason, I wouldn't say, oh, it's because the product was terrible, it sucked. Right? Like that sort of brand loyalty needs to go both ways, because in any of these deals, it's a marriage. And it shouldn't be a marriage of convenience. It should be a marriage, meaning that there should be actual love between the advertiser and the show, and between the show and the advertiser. It doesn't mean you love everything about the show, or that you're not going to diversify across political media. In fact, I urge advertisers who are skittish to do exactly this. I'd mentioned this to Dan on stage a while ago, and we tried to effectuate it, actually, was sort of block buying of political advertising. So if you want to advertise on my show, you should also buy. You won't get this from people who necessarily disagree with me politically, but I say this. There's a good case to be made that you should buy on our show, and then you should also buy on Pod Save America. And the reason being, if somebody gets mad at you for advertising on my show, you can always say, well, look, it wasn't a political thing. There are lots of people with lots of different opinions. It's a thing that half the country thinks one way, half the country thinks another way. And so we advertise to all those people. We want all those people to be our consumers and be familiar and interested in our product.
Expectation management is such an important piece of this, and we were talking about that earlier today, right? And I think gravity pulls you towards avoiding that, because salespeople need to make the sale, and everybody wants to grow their platform, and agencies, we want to find somewhere that it's going to work for the client. We know that this type of content performs really well, and that you really put your back into the endorsements. But at the same time, to stop and pause and say, hold on, let's make sure you know what you're getting yourself into and what might happen as a result, so you can have a proactive plan in advance, is not an easy thing to do. How do you deal with that and think about that?
So, first of all, I will say, I think that my show in particular, I'm extremely careful about the things that I say on air. I know, because I've been doing this for a very long time. My show is now a legacy show. I've been doing my show since 2015, so it's been around for a while. And so I know the sorts of things that are likely to trigger a real problem for our show, for the company, for advertisers. But beyond that, I do tell people who are getting into any space with me, I'm a controversial figure, I get that. And so I tell them, look, there may be blowback that's just associated with that very fact. Funny story that's quasi-related. So one time I'm in Israel, and my friend Nissim Black, who is actually a black rapper who became a Hasidic Jew, and he lives in Israel, and they're making a series about him at HBO. And he calls me up and he says, I want to meet you at the Western Wall. I said, sure, no problem. So I meet him there. He's like, it's urgent. Okay, fine. So I get there, and he takes out his phone and he says, I want to take a picture with you. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, now I need to explain to you why. HBO is doing this series about me. I'm not sure I like the direction the series is moving in. If the series is moving in a direction that I don't like, I want to be able to tweet out this photo so they cancel the series.
And what was your take on that? Were you good with that?
I said it's brilliant. First of all, that's a great way to get out of an HBO contract. I never heard that one before. But that's sort of I get that, and I think that it's incumbent on hosts to be honest with the people they're working with. I mean, I'm honest with I hope everybody we work with, everybody who's not just an advertiser but a business partner, about the environment that we live in. And then on the other side of that, I want to be honest that I think there's a massive arbitrage opportunity for advertisers between reality and the online world. I can't emphasize that enough. If you spend all day on X, you're just not getting a good picture of what the American people think about literally anything. It is mind poison. I don't even have it on my phone. And I speak as somebody who's a fan of Elon Musk and was very much a fan of him buying X. Like the reality is that it is so easy until he got rid of all the safety procedures and basically allowed anything to fly at X, right? Like that sort of thing is a real problem. And I think that when we see again that most of the comments you get on X do not translate into people actually canceling sales or even people who are your customers, right? Then that gives you a better picture as to how the market is working and how the market is intaking information than whatever the hot trend on X is or what's hot online that day.
So one of the things that struck me about the Daily Wire is how much further you'll go for your brands in the way that you do business. And, I think it's so great that you're both here, just sharing the different approach that you take as an independent. What are some of the things that you see your company doing for brands or you're doing individually that you don't see when you check out other shows?
So first of all, I love when I'm able to do ad integration. So right now, one of my favorite ad integrations is Perplexity. So we have a big contract with Perplexity, and I actually do use Perplexity in my everyday life because I'm in the informational business. And so in the middle of the show, I'll break into the show if I have to look something up. Like the other day, I was critiquing Gavin Newsom, suggesting the governor of this august state, my former state, and Gavin Newsom had suggested that California is a net tax donor, meaning that people pay more in taxes in California than they take out in taxes. And I was pointing out that that's actually really a dishonest statistic because it is taxpayers in California who pay the taxes, and it is people who are generally not paying taxes who are taking out the taxes. And so you can't really attribute any of that to Gavin Newsom's policies. If a bunch of rich people live in California and pay taxes to the federal government, that has no correlation with being a net tax recipient state. The state is not paying taxes. In any case, I looked up on Perplexity in the middle of the show what percentage of all welfare dollars in the United States go to California. And so I'll stop in the middle of the show and I'll say, and now I'm going to check out with my sponsor, Perplexity, what percent? And then I'll read the answer on the air and we'll put up on the screen what that looks like. Right? That's a great way for the audience to familiarize themselves with the product and to see that actually how it works. We've done this with Boll & Branch as well on a completely different note. Boll & Branch, one of my favorite advertisers. They're wonderful. I literally do travel with their product. They're that good. And so we made a point of that during our election night broadcast. Like it was getting very, very late. I was very tired. I just took out a blanket and curled up with a Boll & Branch blanket in the middle of the broadcast. It sold them a lot of blankets.
They're good blankets.
They're fantastic. They're great. Really good.
Go to bollandbranch.com/CAO. So you've had some offers, I imagine. I don't know if we've talked about it, but I would imagine that the usual suspects have wanted you to fold the Daily Wire in, right? And you're like a grandfather in this industry, relatively speaking, right? 10 years in podcasting. Why haven't you done it? Why didn't you take the check?
Well, if I were a host alone, I might think about it. But the reality is that I'm not a host alone, right? We built an entire company off the back originally of my brand, but it's now a much larger company than that, right? Our hosts include people ranging from Matt Walsh to Jordan Peterson. It includes, we recently signed Isabel Brown, Michael Knowles. So we've built the brand out to include a wide variety of content, which is why the company's a lot bigger than just me. One of the things that we wanted to do in the early years was ensure that we weren't a one-car crash company, right? If I got hit by a car, then not everybody lost their job all at once. And so, by the way, policy genius. Anyway, the reality of building a company means that it's very important to keep the independence. And so I think that's the real reason why. We always had bigger aspirations than for me to just be a show host.
Okay, this is where I want to hear from both of you. We've talked about the things you get out of staying independent, right? But beyond the money, what is the price that you pay for being independent? What are the challenges that you have to face off with? And I'd love to get both of your perspectives on it. But the things that you have to overcome because of the decision that you've made and the offers that you've said no to?
I mean, the most obvious one is just peace of mind. Meaning, obviously, when you're the person who's responsible for 250 employees, then you have to make the call every single day as to, whether some people are going to keep their jobs, lose their jobs, if the market goes up, if the market goes down, if it suddenly becomes soft, if people turn off politics for several months because an election is over and now it's the summer. That sort of stuff has real ramifications. So just I would imagine that the stability of just receiving a check in the mail without having to think about that very often must be incredibly comforting. Also, in the space that I'm in, it's not just that the business is volatile, it's that politics itself is incredibly volatile. And so, obviously, the old Yiddish curse says, may you live in interesting times. And we certainly are getting the old Yiddish curse, right? We're living in very, very interesting times, which is good for our business in one way, meaning people want to listen and hear what the hell's going on. And it's very bad in another, which means you can wrong foot yourself so easily in this moment when everything is incredibly volatile and when all the lines are being erased and redrawn almost every day like an Etch-a-Sketch. And so because of that, the amount of time and worry that you put into everything that's being said on your platform, every development, every tech development, the lead time on what you're doing, like all these elements, they keep you up at night. I mean, this is the thing that I think we all understand because we're all in business, is that actually, being in business, far from being solid and easy, it's incredibly difficult just because if you care about your employees, if you care about the people who work for you and what you're doing in the world, you're losing sleep for sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything Ben said, and what he was describing is just the difference between being a founder and an employee, right? So there's trade-offs you make, and one factor in those trade-offs is you're going to have to bet on yourself and take a greater share of the sort of risk equation. But for that, the upside potential is increased. And I think the other part of your question, which is what do you lose about the point of independence, is I just really love doing this. So I want to be able to do this for the next 30, 40, 50 years of my life. And in my first iteration of my career, between the ages of 21 and 27, when I built that business, I gave up so much control that at some point, other people made decisions which influenced how much I loved showing up and doing it every day. So because I found something in my life that I actually want to do for 50 years, I've learned from that to keep control of that thing in my hands, which might mean doing 3 episodes a week, or it might mean doing 1 episode a month, depending on what I've got to do to stay in love with this. But I want that control. And I actually think for my advertisers, for my partners, for my team, it's in everyone's interest to make sure that I can control at least my show to the point that it stays my ikigai. That's the kind of way that I look at it, that Japanese proverb of something you find that's like remunerative, you're good at, it serves the world. This was my ikigai. And actually, 5 years ago when I was running that company and it was publicly listed, I said that my last dance in my life would be building a media company. And so I know for sure that I'm going to design this company in a way where I can do it for 50 years. And that is independence. But with that comes, as you say, betting on yourself, which I'm fine to bet on ourselves.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, I'm really comfortable with
you guys have figured it out to an extent, but it's stressful, right? And so, Stephen, you had a social media company.
Yeah,
I mean, you like this what we call podcasting. You might call it a show. You might call it something else, but there's something. It feels like both of you made a decision that was going to be the anchor, even though it's not the only channel you're engaging with audiences on. It seems like that's home base. Am I making an assumption because I am biased toward it, or is that an actual, is that how you see it?
I mean, as far as the podcasting sphere,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, no, for sure. Listen, it's the closest to my heart. My show is me. Mm-hmm. I am my show. I mean, the way that I talk to people in real life is the way that I talk to people on the show, which I think is why the show is successful. I think that the shows that aren't successful are the ones that are not like that, where suddenly you become mannered and you can tell the inauthenticity. I think the podcast medium is amazing. It's stripping away inauthenticity. That's why I think people really like it so much. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that still gets me up every morning. It's still where I spend the majority of my time. It's why there's a division in our business and how it's run, right? I don't actually have a formal title with my company. I'm a co-founder of the company, but I'm not a president, CEO, or COO, right? We have people who do that.
Well, and you got books, you write articles, and you use all the mediums, right? But what is it that you feel like this does that others do not?
Well, I mean, I will admit that I do love writing. I love writing. I love writing, but because I like sitting and contemplating and listening to Brahms while I write. But that's a different thing.
Don't we all?
I'm a violinist by original trade. What this allows me to do is speak into the thing that people want to hear. And I think that that's really important. The reason that you get into this is not just because you want to say something, it's because you want people to hear something. And if you're the biggest mistake I think that people make in the podcast industry is focusing more on what they want to say than on what people want to hear. And there I don't mean that you should cater your message to the audience, that the audience should have control of you, but what people typically want to hear from you is the thing that you're good at, right? It's the thing that they find most interesting about you. And so what I've found, and I've tried a bunch of different things, what people want from me is an authoritative take on the news. More than anything else, when people are very, very confused about what's going on in the world, because my show is an information-first show. If you listen to it, despite all of the actual stereotypes about the show, the actual show is extremely information-heavy. That is always my fallback position. This is something I learned from talk radio, right? When you're on talk radio and you're talking for long periods of time, there comes a point where you run out of things to say. And you look, and it's dead air, and there's still a clock running. So where do you go? So every talk show host has a place that's like their safe space where they go. For some people, it's making jokes. For some people, it's anger. They ratchet up the volume. For me, it was always information, like more information, more information. And it turns out that that's actually what people want from me, is to give information and authoritative takes. And so this is the place where I can do that. And it allows me, it's a window into everything else I want to do. I know more about things because I have to learn about things in order to speak authoritatively about those things. I have to read 4 to 6 books a week just so I can speak about the things that I want to speak about. And so I take what I do really seriously. I think there are a lot of people in my industry who don't, and who are, without criticizing specific names, who engage in conspiratorialism because for the sake of that, and because it's fun, and because it's cotton candy. And I don't like that because, again, I think that's not what it's for.
And me? Oh. Yeah, the medium. I think the once upon a time I was making when I was running my marketing company. I was making Facebook watch videos that would do tens of millions, or I remember the furthest reaching was 33 million views, and it was a 2-minute viral video back in the Facebook viral days. And if I would go out on the street or I would speak to my friends, nobody ever mentioned them. I never went outside, even though those 2-minute videos were doing tens of millions of views. And no one ever came up to me and said, I love those surface level viral videos you're doing. And then, because of that, because I could see that the world was going more ephemeral, the media was getting shorter and shorter, it was still at that time quite polished, I believed that poles rise together, which is when digital music explodes, vinyl records come back in. And in terms of supply and demand, I think there was a growing absence of depth. And that's actually the space that Joe Rogan was occupying. He was occupying that more deeper, a stronger parasocial relationship, longer form. So that's why I started the Diary of a CEO. And in that first episode that did 1,000 downloads, mainly my friends and team members, I got more feedback than anything I'd ever done in those viral Facebook videos. And for me, I enjoyed it more as well. And those two factors of depth and enjoyment, like depth, you could as a proxy for the word like impact and enjoyment, are the two signals to follow in life. So I did that. I stopped my Facebook page, which had 1 million followers, didn't post another video, and focused on the Diary of a CEO. And I think about this all the time with the future of media. I think, what are the platforms at the moment and channels offering the greatest depth and the strongest parasocial relationships in a world where AI has entered the room, and it's going to make it really, really easy for a kid in Yugoslavia to make video and audio now. So if there was ever a moment where depth and parasocial relationships to another human being are going to be more important than ever before, it is now. And so as a side thought, that's mulling, and I was actually talking about with Caroline before I walked on stage, this is why we're seeing such success with streamers. I was with a streamer the other day, and I was like, so tell me about what you do. He was like, so what I do is I wake up in the morning, and I turn the camera on. I was like, then what do you do? He goes, like, nothing. I was like, so how long do you sit there? He goes, 8 hours. And I'm like, so what are your audience doing? He's like, 18. I was like, what are your audience doing? He goes, they're sitting there with me. So what do you guys do? We watch, sometimes I'll put on Judge Judy because there's no IP rights on that.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.